As draft night approaches, less than a week away now, we have to talk about the minutia of what happens on draft night. Could there be a trade up to go get a player they have to have? Could it be a trade out to get value? Could there be a sneaky third option? We're going to talk about it today on Locked On Chiefs.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome back, friends and neighbors, to week till draft night. I'm looking forward to this. I hope you guys are too. Welcome back to Locked On Chiefs, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day on every platform, starting on YouTube and echoing out on all the podcast platforms. Make sure you like, sub, and hit the bell on YouTube right now, as well as thanks for making this your first listen. Make your next listen another Locked On show, maybe the scouting show, maybe one of the opponent shows. Give Q a listen every now and then, but you don't have to listen to Raiders if you don't want to. It's perfectly fine. Not a big deal. But we have a lot for you. We're a week out, and you got to get the draft guide if you want to know what's going on. It's at rogueapc.com. Use the code MATRIX, LOC, to get yourself a nice little discount. It's all of my draft work, all my staff's draft work, stats, everything, research, all into it in one spot to get you ready for this draft. It's a heck of a lot of work, and I am pretty proud of it this year. So please check that out and give it a toss if you like. You can also find more information at NFL33.com and RGR Football.
And I'm Chris Clark from Chiefs Corner. There is a lot to talk about. Draft is only a week away. I cannot wait. This is one of my favorite times of year. And it is always a question, which way is Kansas City going to go? We're going to talk about trades today and what Kansas City can do, moving up, moving down, and what else they could maybe look at. But one of the things that I always love about this time of year is it's always a question what Kansas City is going to be doing. Because one thing that I think we need to mention before we get into the trades is Kansas City actually had Zay Flowers practicing with Patrick Mahomes on Wednesday. That is a little bit of a twist. They did it with Quentin Johnston, which I think made a little bit more sense since he was from TCU. But now it's Zay Flowers. So we'll see if that's a new trend that they do. It's interesting.
It is. It's not – I don't see it as a circumnavigation of the rules, but it isn't in the CBA that I'm aware of. And I've talked to two knowledgeable sources on that 1,300-page document or something that I've never read all the way through. So I got to ask folks who know better than me. But that it is outside. I do think there's some mud on whether it's an actual 30 visit or not. Either way, the Chiefs have plenty. We don't generally find out about all of them any year. But this in particular is what sparked this conversation today. You have a player in there that some feel like his value is all over the place. He's at the top of the second round on my board, which is going to come out on Monday, if not a little bit before. So make sure you hit Twitter and go sign up, get subbed over at NFL33.com so you can get it. It will be my horizontal board that covers the entire draftable spectrum. He's a high second on my board. There are teams that we understand have him in the first. Could the Chiefs be one of them? Maybe. Is this one of those deals that they're just doing their due diligence in case someone like they had Rashee Rice in, they had Quentin in, and now they've had Zay actually working with Patrick? That's a big plus. But are these all contingencies? Is this all aimed towards 31 to see who's going to be available as a possibility? Or does it lead to a trade-up scenario? And that's kind of where I'm leading right now.
Well, and I do want to say, regardless of whether or not they have a first-round grade on him, it doesn't really matter because at 31, if he is there or they're going to trade up to get him at the bottom of the first round, it's not going to matter. Most of your guys that you have a first-round grade on are going to be gone unless you're trading up into the teens.
And that's exactly the scenario that I'm looking at.
Yeah. And another person that they had an interview with that we didn't know about until just today, I believe, was Broderick Jones. So that's an interesting one as well. I'm sure Ryan enjoys that. But the thing that really sticks out to me here, and Ryan and I kind of talked about this a little bit before we actually started, we didn't know. I think we knew about 14 players that they had top 30 visits with last year. I don't know what that number is at right now, but I think it's about the same. So they didn't have a top 30 visit with Trent McDuffie. They didn't have a top 30 visit with George Karlaftis that we know about.
Right.
Just want to throw that out there because I'm not so sure that it really matters if they have a top 30 visit or not. At least we don't know that they had visits with their first round picks last year.
And that's what it's the confounding part about this franchise in particular. Other franchises, other fan bases get a little bit more clue by who comes in for those 30s. Who did they talk to at the combine? We know several players that like maybe didn't even get but 2 minutes at the combine, asked 3 questions, walked away, and next thing you know, they're on the roster. So like we have no concept of what is actually going on in the room, and I think that is just it's good cloak and dagger from the Chiefs front office. It's confounding for us, but it also leaves our options completely open. And so I do think that it's worth taking a look at this. Obviously, I've been talking about Broderick Jones since the beginning of the draft cycle, and I do think he is still OT1 on my board, and I do think he is an excellent fit for the Chiefs. He in particular, maybe more so than either Quentin Johnston or Zay Flowers, would require, in my opinion, a trade up. Now, do most teams have him at the top of their board? No. I understand that there are several that do, but the majority seem to have Paris Johnson stacked as number 1, and that's perfectly fine. That helps the Kansas City Chiefs. But I don't think 31 is a place that you can get him, so you have to look at trading up. And that's where the question comes, what's the value that you're willing to go to? What's the range that you're willing to go to? We've looked at it in mocks, but do you have a hard feeling for like where you think that they can afford to get?
I don't. I think that there's a lot of people and there's a lot of things that really go into this. And one of the things you and Matt talked about actually yesterday was, Veach has had these conversations. He knows what it's going to take to get up to different spots. And I think that was a fantastic point by Matt. He's already had those conversations. They already know about what it would take to get to, say they want to get up to 18, say they want to get to 22, I'm sure. And I'm sorry, I'm not looking at boards. So if those are AFC teams that are rivals, forget I said those numbers. But my point is he's had those conversations with teams. He knows. I just threw out those 2 numbers as an example. He knows what it would take to get up to those spots. And really what it comes down to for me is, what do they want out of this draft? Do they want a guy that's going to be able to step in and start day one? Because if you're going to want a guy like that, you're more than likely going to have to trade up for him. Really, the only way you're going to be getting that type of guy is if you're getting a defensive end or tackle more than likely, because I don't think a wide receiver starts day one on this team. And does that matter? Not necessarily so much, but if you're going to trade up to go get somebody, you would think that you'd want them to be a guy that could step in and start immediately.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to give away all the candy in the shop, but if you guys go check out the RGR football channel here on YouTube, you can see a short of my exact opinion that exactly what you said, that the top 3 receivers are on this roster, and then Richie James, Cedric Tillman, and Justin Watson are going to be the next 3. Yes, they have to go make an acquisition, but that's a second-round pick for Cedric Tillman that I'm projecting right now, because I agree with you. It's got to be tackle or defensive end if you're moving up.
Well, and the other part of that, and I guess you could look at it this way, we haven't seen that they've had any interest in Jackson Smith and Jigba, I guess, but that would be the only other guy that they could probably maybe step in and maybe kick somebody out of that top 3 wide receiver spot. But that seems unlikely. But the interesting thing to me, and the thing I'm taking away from this in general, is they've had in Anton Harrison. They've had in Broderick Jones. To me, that means that they're not thinking that left tackle is a done deal, because you don't have those guys in if you think left tackle is a done deal and it's going to be Juwan Taylor. It doesn't make sense to me unless you're just trying to do smoke, which I don't see that as being what they'd be doing in those moves.
Well, and we do know that the Chiefs have visits that we don't hear about every year. They are able to keep things hush-hush if they want to. And I agree with you. I don't think they'd be letting the news out that they had left tackles in if there wasn't a reason for it. They could have kept it to themselves. So I agree with you. Now, that's not the only scenario. Trading up is one thing. What happens in the reverse? What if Zay's gone? What if Quentin's gone and Broderick's gone? We're going to talk about trading down and what that's worth on the backside of this.
And I want to tell you about our friends over at Built Bar. Something exciting is coming to Built on April 22nd. I don't have all the details yet, but the excitement level is real, and it's something you won't want to miss. If you know how Built works, they have the most incredible protein bars in the world, and they do these amazing flavor drops with unreal flavors in limited quantity. So mark your calendars and head to Built.com on April 22nd to be one of the first to discover what all the hype is about. I can't wait to see what the new flavor is. Make sure to use promo code LOCKEDON15 and you'll get 15% off your order at Built.com.
Very interesting. I'm digging it.
You didn't really tell us. What do you think it would cost to go up?
I think the prime targets, you weren't very far off. I think it's 16, 19, and 23 are the prime targets to move up. And I think 23 is probably about as high as they want to go if they just don't feel like abandon everything, right? If they went up anything higher than that, if they were chasing a particular player, that'd be the biggest move up that they've made since Patrick Mahomes. And I'm just not feeling that in this particular draft. So 23, I think you can give them a third. You might be able to give them get away with a package of fourths or a third next year. Just depends on what the Vikings are looking for. But I do think they are a prime spot to move up there into the low 20s and try to get something done.
Yeah, and the one thing I will say, and I would argue with you on this, is if they're going to move up and they are wanting to move up even higher than 20s, I think it has to be for left tackle. Unless they think that there's a wide receiver that they believe is a true legit number one that's going to make this offense different, I would think that they would move up for a left tackle. And I say that because everything we've seen them do over the past couple of years since the Tampa Bay loss in the Super Bowl is protect Patrick, protect Patrick, protect Patrick. If they're going to do it for any position, left tackle would be the one, and I could see them moving up even further if they want to go get a guy.
Agreed. If you feel you have to pull out all the stops, then you pull out all the stops. I'm not there yet myself, but they very well may be.
Well, and that's only if they decide that guy is a Pro Bowl type guy or even maybe an All Pro type guy. Yeah. I mean, that's what you're going to be looking at that point. But the point is you're trying to protect Patrick the best you can. And if you have to go get a left tackle or you feel like you want to go get a guy that's left tackle, he's got to be a guy that can protect Patrick for the next 5 years. And you may end up having to give up a first rounder next year, which I know a lot of people won't like. But if you got to go up high enough, you got to do it.
Yeah, it comes down to risk versus reward. How bad do you want it? If you don't want it, that's the flip side of that coin. And a lot of folks are talking about, it's the drafts in Kansas City. They have to make a selection. I'm sure Clark Hunt wants to make a selection on Thursday night, but
I'm sure he'd love him to move up, to be quite honest, and make it really interesting.
Agreed. But, like from a standpoint of business, from a standpoint of exposure for the franchise, we all know Germany's watching and he's got his eyes on what's going to go on overseas as well. Like you want that hype, right? But it comes down to, as much as that may be important to the business side, to the franchise product that you're putting on the field, Brett Veach doesn't give a snot about that. It is, what is this player able to bring to my team? So if their board goes off, and they likely have somewhere between 15, maybe a max of 20 or 21 players on their board, if they're all gone, if they cannot move up, if they can't get a deal done, maybe the league doesn't want to deal with them. If their board is empty in the first round, and they're sitting at 31, they have to consider moving out, despite it being in Kansas City. I don't think there's any way around that.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with you unless they have somebody that they absolutely love in the second round. Because at 31, you're going to get a guy that, if you love him as a second rounder, you take him at the bottom of the first, and you get an extra year potentially with a fifth-year option. And it's not a great value if they have him rated as a second-round player. But we've talked about this. The reality is your guys are going to be gone likely by 23, 24 probably. I mean, there's always outliers with teams that pick guys that, maybe shouldn't have been drafted until the third or fourth round. But generally speaking, the league is pretty close, I would think, in the number of guys that are first-round picks.
Yeah. So in this scenario, say Flowers, despite having a great day-to-day with Patrick Mahomes, gets selected by the Buffalo Bills, or Quentin Johnson is gone, and Broderick goes, the Jets don't get Aaron Rodgers and they snag him at 13. I don't know. But all your targets, your board empties out, and you're sitting there. Maybe the last guy goes off at 24, 25, and you start making calls. Who wants to come up? It is a prime position for, if you like Levis, if you like Hooker. I think Anthony Richardson is probably gone by then, but you never know. The league may come to its senses and realize that the risk for Richardson is quite heavy, and I think the media is very much playing down the risk of that selection. So he might still be around there too. That actually plays in the Chiefs' favor. And so I look back down at what comes in the second round. Maybe Detroit at 38, I believe they have, wants to move back up. I don't know. I don't think the Chiefs can fall out of the 30s, is my point. From going from 31, 39 is as far as I want to go. Do you have a limit? Do you think is best for this franchise?
Quite frankly, I don't. And I say that because I'm not going to pigeonhole them into staying in the 30s if somebody offers them ridiculous compensation to come up and get a QB. That's one thing about being at 30, 31, 32 every year is you're always going to be in that prime position of somebody wanting to get that fifth-year option on a QB and somebody willing to maybe overpay to move up to get it. So even if they're in the 50s, I really would hate this, but even down into the 60s, I would consider it if you're talking about maybe getting an additional first-round pick. But here's the thing. You have the option of still trading those picks and going and getting back up into the round earlier if you need to. So to me, I think it would be worth it if they get the right compensation, if somebody's willing to overpay to come up and get a guy like Malik Hooker or to get a guy like Hernan Hooker. I think that's somebody that possibly could be had at 31.
For me, I hope that they don't. I understand where you're coming from. If you get a next year's first, okay, that makes more sense. But I do think as I look at my board right now, and I'm 80% done stacking it, the girth, like most years right now, the most selections that I have on my board are in the second round. So if you can stay in there and stay relatively high in it, I think that they can get good value, pick up another pick. Interestingly enough, as I'm not done yet, the fourth round actually has a couple more players than the third round right now. So you might see a more divergent kind of path for a trade.
Yeah, and that was kind of my point is you could be in a situation where maybe you say, okay, I will go back to the 50s or 60s and take the second round pick, and I'll then package one of my fourths to go back up in the second round and have an earlier second round pick and have two picks in the second round as opposed to, and maybe you get somebody up that's a little bit higher. And who knows what you can do with all the picks you have. We've talked about this a lot. You're not going to pick all the guys and they're not going to all be on the roster. There's still a little bit more to talk about when we start talking about trading down and how far that they would go. And we'll get back to that right after this. All right. So I do think that trading down is something that I know Clark Hunt doesn't want. You already talked about that in the business side. I doubt Brett Veach really wants to as well. He's not the type that actually really trades down very often. But I do agree with you. I think that the value is staying in the 30s, and that would make the most sense. I was just trying to say, if somebody's willing to offer a first-round pick next year, that's got to be awfully tempting because you're always going to be picking in the 30s with Mahomes. As long as he stays healthy, you're always going to be picking late 20s or 30s.
Let me give you another scenario. How does 34 sound to you?
I mean, you're top of day 2, so that sounds pretty good.
Because I can see a concept here where there's a particular player out there that wants to be moved. And you could swap, give up 31, go back to 34 with the Arizona Cardinals, bring in Nuk, and work out the rest of the compensation. If right now it's probably happening, if it needs to be, as we record this, you have to have a contract reset or extension or whatever you have to do already figured out. We talked about that a little bit with Matt yesterday. That's probably getting done right now as we speak, if this is anywhere close to a reality, so that if you pull the trigger, you know what you're getting into, and the players agreed to sign whatever addendum it is to make it work. But would that be something? I know most people don't value Nuk Hopkins at 31 years old with a first-round pick. I certainly agree with that. I could swap first for the 34 in the second, and then obviously you'd have to compensate them with other picks. But is that even appealing to you?
I mean, you could do it. I don't know how appealing that is because what else are you going to have to give up to get him? Because you're not going to just move back 3 spots and get him. I mean, that's not going to be enough. I would think that you're going to have to give up at least a 4th rounder, if not the 3rd rounder, to get that type of deal done. And while it does kind of fit your scenario of giving them a new receiver that can step in and be productive and start this year, which would be great. So it does take care of one of your positions of need. I do think that that's going to be a question is you're probably going to lose another pick in the at least 3rd or 4th round doing that type of deal. But you bring in Nuk Hopkins, if you can have a contract done with him, I think that makes a lot of sense. And then you have a guy that steps in day 1 and can be a day 1 starter for you. And you have somebody that can help Kelsey open things up for the other guys.
Now, the other reason that's even a thing is because he's mentioned it. And he's mentioned that he'll rework the contract. I think that's important. But for me, it's a fine line. Like you said, I actually think it's going to take more than that. I could do it with a swap of those two picks, 31 for 34, and throw in 95 of the third round. I worry that it's going to take a second rounder to get it done. I'm not willing to go there. Are you?
No, and I don't know. I don't even know that I go there with a third rounder. Nobody has wanted to give up a second rounder for him at this point. So why would you give up a third rounder at this point? You're going to be there on draft night. I would not be wanting to give up a third round pick. And I understand that people want him here and it would be a great wide receiver to have skill set wise. But again, you're talking about a guy that's 31 years old that's going to command a pretty hefty salary regardless. I mean, yeah, he can restructure, but it's still going to be a hefty salary. And more than likely, the only way you're going to make that work is probably add void years, which is just going to screw you in the cap in the future. So, I mean, yeah, you have a chance that he sends you back to a Super Bowl. I get that part of it, but I just don't think it's going to be worth the third round pick. I think that if you're looking to do that, if you're looking to swap picks and then throw a fourth, I guess since they have two of them, I guess I'd be okay with that. You're not going to get value out of a fourth round pick better than Hopkins, I don't think, at the wide receiver position. So I get it. I don't know. I'm to the point now where it has been so drawn out. I'm just about to the point to say I'm not thinking that they make a move for Hopkins and they just go get somebody else.
Yeah.
Because the thing that you start looking at is it makes more sense to build around Patrick and give him somebody that he can grow with. Hopkins is going to be a one year or 2 year Band-Aid at most.
Agreed. In that, even though I think he is focused on longevity, I don't know that it's going to be long enough. So I'm with you there. But that's just one scenario. And we know there's a lot of hype. We'll hear some things over the weekend, but we're going to come back. I'm going to talk with Matt Waldman of the RSP tomorrow. You'll hear from us, go over Matt and his offensive philosophy on running backs in particular, but a couple of other things as well. I hope that you guys are looking forward to it because I certainly am. And then next week, our final mock draft that Chris gets to set up, and we get to see what the last scenario is. Tuesday, we'll go over the draft board in its finality and take a look at who are the fits for the Chiefs. What else you got?
And actually, I'm going to throw a little bit of a wrench in that. I will be doing the last mock draft, but I'm going to put out a poll. Trade up, trade down.
Ooh, I like that. In the comments here on YouTube and any of the comments here in the next couple of days at Locked On Chiefs on Twitter. You can hit us on the Spotify reviews, the iTunes reviews, the Apple podcast reviews. I forget that one. You can hit at Chiefs Corner or at Ryan Tracy even. What do you want? The final scenario of the mock draft season. Trade up, trade down, stay put. What do you got? Let us know. I like that, Chris. That's going to be fun.
Yeah, and I do think that we're going to get a lot of responses. I'll get that out shortly after we get done recording this. And I'll put it up for a couple of days because I will not probably get to the mock till later this weekend. And I will give you time to get us answers as to what you want, trade up, trade down. And then we get to go figure out what simulator we're going to use to figure out how we're going to get this done and which direction we're going to go. So I'm excited about this. And anybody that has watched us, we are here every day, 5 days a week. We do appreciate you every day or so that are listening every single day. Thank you so much. And we will have a lot more coming next week. And we're going to have a ton of draft coverage. I mean, that's just, if you go back and look at what we did last year, there was a ton of draft coverage with all the different videos that came out and a lot of different audio as well. So expect that come draft day and after to cover you for whatever Kansas City does in this draft.
Absolutely. I'll have my thoughts. Chris will have his. We'll ask for yours. Get prepared. It's almost draft week. Thank you for spending your time today with us. Check out another Locked On show now. We'll have a good evening. You have one too, and we'll be back with you tomorrow.